Where the coastal cliffs of Glamorgan give way to sandy bays west of the River Ogmore, the villages of Nottage and Newton, once busy with medieval shipping, slumbered at the start of the 19th century. They were awakened with the opening of what were called Porthcawl docks in 1825 to export iron and coal from Maesteg and Tondee. Greatly expanded by the Brogden family from Cheshire, the docks also spurred the growth of a popular new seaside resort. But towards the end of the century, the death knell was sounded for Porthcawl as a shipping port by the new Barry and Port Talbot docks.
By 1900, there was a devastating slump in the trade of Porthcawl docks, and their closure would shortly follow. But rather than sink into obscurity as the 20th century dawned, Porthcawl took advantage of its merits as a seaside resort on a beautiful stretch of coast. Gloom was cast aside. Putting a smile on people's faces was considered to be the way ahead. A Maesteg preacher warned Sunday trippers that they were going to hell. "We are not going to hell," said one of them. "We are going to Porthcawl."
As the 20th century began, Porthcawl already had a reputation as a beautiful seaside resort with a fine esplanade. The Rest Convalescent Home pioneered healthcare for sick colliers, and a golf club at Rest Bay received the name Royal. Ina Bynan, aged 94, recalls Porthcawl's growing popularity.
There were a lot of people coming down because they were advised to come for the fresh air there. It was supposed to be very good. We had some nice hotels, and the people were very nice who came there, but the local peoples were extra nice. Yeah, no snobbery in those days. Everybody smiled at each other and, talked. It was very, very nice, lovely.
Though still quite small and entirely separate from the villages of Nottage and Newton, Porthcawl was expanding. Its main street was John Street, named after John Brogden, the docks pioneer.
John Street was quite a lot of shops, really. Little shops, I remember the dairies there, grocer shops, of course, the Star and all that. I remember those.
But Porthcawl docks, the stimulus for the town's growth, were now in their last few years. During their halcyon days, they'd drawn many settlers to the town, including one of George Jackson's grandfathers.
My grandfather, his name was John Power. He was born in Waterford in Ireland. He got a job on the tug, the James Brogden, to bring boats into Porthcawl and out of Porthcawl. It's a big coal exporting port.
George Jackson's grandfather was coxswain of Porthcawl lifeboat, a dangerous occupation in view of the hazardous nature of the rocky coast.
It's one of the most dangerous coasts you could have. That is why the docks closed down, because of the Tusker Rock. You see, it's a dangerous place getting in.
Porthcawl's large inner harbour closed in 1906, with the Chrysalis being the last ship out. It proved a tragedy for James Brogden, son of the dock's developer, who died the following year, with his wife having to leave their Seabank house home. The docks closed, but paddle steamers still berthed at the pier for sometimes choppy trips across the Bristol Channel.
To Ilfracombe and Lundy Island, yeah, very nice, but it's a very rough crossing.
Porthcawl had long been a popular venue for military summer camps. But in 1914, the soldiers marched to the trenches of France and the First World War. As young Porthcawl lads joined up, injured soldiers returned to the town to convalesce at the rest home. But the peace of Porthcawl was about to be affected too. At quiet Sandy Bay at the end of the war, the Evans family placed a roller coaster and an old aircraft hangar. Coney Beach Funfair was born. It was quite a shock for locals.
Oh, I wasn't allowed to go there, down to Coney Beach, no. Very seldom.
With the fair rapidly becoming a major attraction, Porthcawl boomed. A new station located closer to the beach now welcomed trains packed with trippers.
Droves of them, droves, yeah. All rush into the Esplanade and then they find their way to Treco Bay and the West Bay and all that. And they used to run to Hawkins's toy shop, buy their windmills and buckets and spades.
Even the military were allowed to enjoy the fun at Coney Beach, taken over during the mid-20s coal strife by the Joseph family. Porthcawl also had a high-class clientele, Seabank House becoming the Seabank Hydro Hotel. But many Porthcawl families also took in boarders.
We used to have the same visitors year after year after year because my mother was a very good cook. We used to take 2 parties in, and one lot had the front room and the other one in the back room. My mother and father and myself and my brother, we all slept up the attics, you see. We didn't find it no hardship. We loved it, you know.
Another new excitement in the early 20s was motorcycle racing on the lovely sands of Rest Bay. And the old inner dock had a new lease of life as a pleasure pool. The Salt Lake, as it became known, was highly popular, recalls Louise Malvisi.
Salt Lake was the creme de la creme of Porthcawl. We had paddle boats, we had a diving club, we had a swimming club.
Very successful club it was too, and there was boating on it as well. Very popular indeed.
Attractions brightened the depression gloom. Films and shows at the new Cosy Theatre, roller skating at Cosy Corner, and flying with local pilot George Pines from Rest Bay, a novel experience for Valley's youngster Gwynfryn Petty.
It wasn't a long flight, about for half a crown, but you know, with the fact you had actually taken off, it was a little bit hairy, but you know, the first flight you had nothing to compare it with. It was just slightly bumpy, and you'd taken off, and this was magic.
Modern technology also came to bear in the 1930s with the building of the all-concrete Grand Pavilion on the seafront and a second level being added to the promenade. There were also ambitious, though unrealised, plans to expand Porthcawl east to Newton Bay. And dances at the Grand Pavilion and the casino reflected joie de vivre in Porthcawl as the Depression eased.
My father was an MC of the dances, and it wasn't like it is today. Everyone was introduced to everyone. And if my father saw someone sitting down, not being asked to dance, he'd find someone, introduce them and say, dance with her, you know. White gloves, evening dress, bow ties, long dresses. They were elegant.
But Red Cross and Home Guard uniforms were the order of the day with the outbreak of the Second World War. Even then, Porthcawl retained its style with an unusual mounted Home Guard unit. Philip Howells recalls not all members had fine hunters to ride.
We had a small holding. My dad and I worked on a small milk ground, so of course we used the old horse and cart. And Bess was my little Welsh pony, which I loved, Welsh Cob, of course. And of course, if there was no spare horses, unfortunately, poor old Bess had to double up. And when I finished the milk ground, we were on parade, I had to use poor old Bess.
Many troops were based at Porthcawl during the war, including the specially created 49th Reconnaissance Regiment. The railway station where Doreen Owen worked in the ticket office was a centre of activity.
We were very involved with everything during the war, even though all the troop movements, even the ones that came in by road, we were always sort of involved, knowing what was happening. On a Saturday afternoon or a Saturday morning, all the troops would be going, say, on a 24-hour, 48-hour pass, and the buzz in the station, though, on that Saturday, used to be terrific. We used to call it Saturday-itis.
Among foreign troops, Dutch soldiers made a special impression, especially those in Royal Bodyguard uniforms.
When the Dutch came, Newton was full of the most wonderful uniforms you ever saw. Queen Wilhelmina's Mauritius, Dutch Guards, Queen Wilhelmina's personal army, looking like something from the Merry Widow in Vienna, with their beautiful uniforms of blue with scarlet and their tall hats.
Nearby Stormy Down became an RAF training base and a centre for the Free French. Their success with Porthcawl girls led to attacks by local lads until they could take no more and stormed the Grand Pavilion. Martin Jenkins was present.
The French marched down, the whole of the camp marched down, surrounded the pavilion. They surrounded certain other buildings as well, and they stopped anyone going in or out. And their hit squads came in and picked people that they knew and took them out to give them a hiding. All hell broke loose and everyone was fighting everyone else outside.
The Americans made an impact too when they arrived in 1943. Salt Lake was filled in to become a military parking lot. Among many romances, a GI from Pennsylvania caught Doreen Owen's attention.
I became friendly with a young American tech sergeant, Harry Breyer. I can remember we met on the promenade on a Sunday afternoon. I had been to Sunday school.
But those happy Porthcawl days came to an end with the Normandy landings. Doreen's wartime romance couldn't last.
Sadly, he was caught up in the Battle of the Bulge at the end of the war, and he was taken prisoner, and he died in a prisoner of war camp, mostly from starvation and extreme cold. The weather was terrible.
Young Harry didn't make it, one of many lives cut short by war. In exceptionally stormy weather after the war, tragedy hit Porthcawl. A wartime liberty ship, the Sam Tampa, went aground on rocks west of Rest Bay in April 1947. John David was there with his Coast Guard father and a rescue party.
It was just getting dusk, actually, and the ship was stuck on the end of the point. You can make it out through the heavy weather. The waves are smashing over it. You had a job to look up because of the strength of the wind. We saw some of the crew on the ship. You can make out a couple of the crew. And then, unfortunately, she broke in two, first of all, and then into three. We fired 3 rockets, and they didn't get very far with the force of the wind. I think it was 3 times we got washed away, actually, with all our gear, but we're trying to get as near as we could to the ship.
Not only did the 39 crew of the Sam Tampa perish, but also all 8 members of the Mumbles lifeboat who attempted a rescue.
The bodies we found, I didn't recognise the first one until the Coast Guard said, there's one. It covered in fuel oil, and the fuel oil I'm talking about was like tar. It was thick, and everything, their eyes, nose, mouth, were clogged up with oil, so they suffocated in the water.
In 1951, film star Bob Hope was a celebrity competitor at Royal Porthcawl in the UK Amateur Golf Championships. He charmed all and sundry, including Martin Jenkins's father, no admirer of Hollywood.
He was poo-pooing it. At any rate, Bob Hope turned up, and he was the registering officer at the time, and Bob Hope had to meet him and register him. And my father came home that night and said, "What a wonderful gentleman. Never met anyone as good. These Hollywood people are great."
Porthcawl was becoming increasingly popular. More holidaymakers now arrived by car and bus, but it was still by train that the thousands came. The railway station was particularly busy as people made their way to boarding houses.
People used to send their luggage in advance, PLA it was called, and we used to have masses and masses of luggage, people sending in, and we'd have open up any little space that was on the station, we'd have to open it up, and the van driver would be delivering it all over, down to Checker Bay or wherever.
Coney Beach Fun Fair was a big crowd puller, run by the highly regarded Leslie Joseph. Henry Lewis was employed as a young mechanic.
He built a fine workshops in the back of Coney Beach. He put a machine shop in, second to none. He had a carpentry shop and he had a garage. He even had a blacksmith there. And naturally he had several electricians. And quite a few boys did their apprenticeships there.
Such was Leslie Joseph's standing in the show world that he was knighted for his services. One of the pleasures near the Coney Beach water shoot was to have your photo taken by one of the Palmer family. The fairground was full of unusual people, as Noah Palmer recalls.
It was full of characters, unbelievable characters going back. We always had a lot of people come down and work in the season. And mostly, lots of them were naughty boys hiding from their wives to have a good time with the girls and all that. We also had one character who was working there, he walked around with a hammer. Never did anything, but as long as he had the hammer in his hand, he was going to do something.
As well as renting rooms in boarding houses, people were now beginning to use caravans as well as tents amid the huge sand dunes of Treco Bay. Dennis Theodore's family were in the caravan business from the start. The dunes were quite a problem.
Sir Leslie Joseph used to employ a group of men, 6 or 8 men, and they had a tractor with 8 wheels on it, and they placed that pathway up the dune, winched the caravan up, and then put it on the top of the dune and carry on winching it up until they could sight the caravan, and the caravan normally stayed there then until it was destroyed.
As caravans became more popular, more room was desperately needed. There was a radical solution. The dunes disappeared.
Sir Leslie decided to develop it. So one winter time they bulldozed all the dunes down, and of course then they could put in drains and utilise the space much more. When I started at Treco Bay, there were 38 of us in caravans there. And at one time I think we were over the 3,000 caravans there.
With the dunes gone, Treco Bay, Porthcawl became the biggest caravan site in Europe. The boarding house trade collapsed as the caravan park thousands made Saturday changeovers hectic.
You had massive queues because everyone tended to come and stay in the caravans from lunchtime onwards, and people going out used to leave just prior to lunchtime. And of course everyone was trying to get in and out together.
Long known as a health resort, Porthcawl was now giving a new lease of life to more people than ever.
Porthcawl saved the life of many, many people with dust on their lungs. They could spend the whole summer there for £5 a week. Even if they were on sick benefit or unemployment benefit, they could still afford to live there. And they could breathe this air. People that couldn't sleep could sleep here. People that couldn't breathe could breathe here. It was a lifesaver from the miners from the valleys.
But with the axing of the railway link, getting to Porthcawl became more of a problem from the early 60s. The closure was greeted with dismay.
Disastrous. To me, it was the heart of the town, and I think a lot of people today realise that it should never, never have been closed.
Better economic news had been the establishment in the late 50s of one of Porthcawl's very few industries, when Horace and Douglas Atwood opened a costume jewellery factory. Their products would catch the attention of the world, as Horace Atwood recalls.
At that time, the government was imploring all businesses to export, so we thought we'd concentrate that way, and we were quite fortunate. We got 1 or 2 reasonable contacts abroad, and the business expanded.
With their Porthcawl products being used by television stars, Atwood and Sawyer became quite a large concern, employing some 150 people.
It was reckoned that we were about probably 3rd or 4th top manufacturer of costume jewellery, certainly in British Isles, but if not in Europe.
Porthcawl had already grown considerably, but the post-war era saw several new housing developments. Valley folk retired to the town, and key personnel at the new Margam Steelworks also moved in, surprised by the area's beauty.
It did create a haven, if you like, for the people who were coming into Margam to work. I know several of my friends who'd come from, or seconded from, English steelworks, and they were, where on earth is Porthcawl? You know, where do we live here? But when they saw the beauty of the place, they realised that here was a pleasant place to live.
By now, the Seabank Hotel was well established as a headquarters for international soccer and rugby teams. But the real sporting success for Porthcawl was the boxing at the Coney Beach Arena, one of the biggest venues outside London through the 50s and 60s. One notorious fight that hit the headlines was that between Dick Richardson and Brian London, stopped when London had a cut eye.
And that's when the fun and games started. People started throwing things into the ring, then they started to try and get into the ring. And then Brian just lost it. He started lashing out all around the place. Oh, and other ones jumped in, and they all tried to get into they saw him throwing punches, and they'd all had a few, I think. They started to join in. And the next thing we see, they started throwing chairs. That was the frightening bit. Oh, it was pandemonium. They just sort of went berserk.
The Grand Pavilion couldn't hope or wish to match that kind of excitement. But it did draw big crowds to shows, concerts, conferences, and especially from all over the coalfield to the miners' Eisteddfod.
You wouldn't get into the pavilion on the Saturday unless you started queuing at 7 to 8:30 in the morning for a 9:30 start. And they'd be coming in with their picnic baskets and their hold-alls and everything, all thermos and sandwiches, and they'd sit in the seat all day.
There was also political excitement as Margaret Thatcher addressed a Conservative conference. And excitement of a different kind when the former casino cinema, which drew top stars as the Stoneleigh Club, was destroyed by fire in 1989. A cause of real sadness was a fatal accident at Coney Beach Fairground in 1994. Though many resorts have declined due to foreign holidays, Porthcawl has fought back. Hotels and guest houses are doing well, says Anne Griffiths.
Here in Porthcawl, we're very fortunate that we're in a very good location, because I would say that almost half the business we have is tourism, and obviously very important trade, but more than half of the business we have is of a commercial aspect. And there are 3 golf courses here. There are people throughout the year. There is no business here in Porthcawl, hotel or guest house, that closes for the winter. Porthcawl is very lucky.
Though concerns are voiced about some aspects of Porthcawl's appearance, regeneration projects encourage positive feelings for Lisa Ireland of the younger generation.
I certainly think that Porthcawl is a great town to be in. We have a lovely promenade. We've got an awful lot to offer for visitors. There's certainly an awful lot of people still enjoy the fair on Coney Beach, and there's always hundreds on the beach in the summer and when the sun is shining.
But with the old Salt Lake site unchanged in 60 years, controversy continues regarding the future of the town, and there's a feeling that new investment is needed.
I feel now, in my generation, there's a lot of aspects that should be changed. We need to improve on the attractions that we already have. Certainly, I think we need to have more cafe bars and restaurants, but not just to target youngsters, but to target all generations so they can enjoy just as much as the youngsters can.
During the 20th century, Porthcawl has been one of the most favoured of Wales's communities. Its main economic misfortune, the closure of its docks, occurred almost a century ago. Since then, it has flourished as one of Wales's favourite holiday centres. Nevertheless, there are many locally who feel that Porthcawl needs a new vision of the way ahead if it is to retain its description as the jewel of the Seven Seas.
Next Tuesday at 7:30, Your Century takes a nostalgic look back at Colwyn Bay. Next tonight on HTV, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?